In Lesson 12, Paul explained the operation of the Sun Founder Breadvolt battery module. He described how to configure the Breadvolt to provide 3.3 volts DC to one breadboard power rail and 5 volts DC to the other rail. Paul highlighted some risks that must be understood and dealt with when using an external power supply and a USB programming cable at the same time. Choose the wrong power input, and you could damage your Pico, or worse, the USB interface of your computer. Even if you are using the correct power input, serious damage can occur if you plug the programming cable into the Pico while the Breadvolt is on. Paul advised that users must remember to turn the Breadvolt off before plugging in the USB cable. It's important to have a clear understanding of this issue because our assignment in Lesson 12 is to implement the Breadvolt module, then take the GPS tracker on a walking or driving trip to verify its operation. I confess there have been times when I have forgotten to turn off the external power before plugging in the USB cable. I don't really know how much jeopardy I was in. Let's see if we can understand this issue before we go any further. This schematic represents the power section of the Pico W. J1 is the USB connector on the Pico W. When you plug the USB cable from your computer into the Pico, 5 volts DC power from your computer's USB adapter enters the Pico on J1 pin 1. You can see that the Pico W V bus connector on pin 40 taps directly into that 5 volt line. Notice that whenever we try to provide 5 volt DC power to a breadboard's power rail from pin 40, we are actually drawing power directly from the computer's USB adapter. Whatever power your circuit requires, it will all come from your computer. Depending on what peripherals are attached to your Pico W, you might wind up pulling a fair amount of current through your computer's USB adapter. If you must use pin 40 to provide 5 volt DC power, it's best to total up your current demands first to be sure you won't be pulling more current than the USB adapter can provide. You might be tempted to feed external power directly into pin 40. That's a bad idea. If the USB cable is plugged in while external power is applied to pin 40, the power from the USB cable will be in contention with the power coming from the external power supply. Manufacturing variability makes it difficult to predict the direction or the amount of current flow in a situation like this, but it certainly won't improve the health of your computer's USB adapter. VSys on pin 39 is the recommended connection point for external power. VSys has the benefit of being after diode D1, which prevents any current flowing upstream from the external power supply to your computer's USB controller. Mounting the Breadvolt module on the breadboard, we set the output on the pin 40 side of the breadboard to 5 volts. This establishes the 5 volt rail. At this point, we could use a jumper to bring 5 volts DC to the Pico via VSys on pin 39. As we have seen, D1 should prevent any Breadvolt power flowing upstream to the USB adapter. But with a jumper, nothing prevents USB power flowing towards the Breadvolt. I suspect it is this USB power that lights the Breadvolt LEDs when the Breadvolt is off and the USB cable is plugged in. Even worse, any 5 volt peripherals attached to the power rail will draw their power directly from the computer's USB adapter. Rather than using a simple jumper, I connect Pico W pin 39 to the 5 volt DC power rail with a 1N5817 Schottky diode shown as D2 below. D2 should prevent any USB power from flowing towards the Breadvolt module. It should also prevent any peripherals on the 5 volt rail from drawing any power from the USB adapter. So D1 and D2 should theoretically relieve us of the necessity to shut off the Breadvolt when we need to plug the USB cable into the Pico W. I have used this setup since Paul first mentioned the Breadvolt during his Pico W course. From time to time, I have forgotten to turn the Breadvolt off when using the USB cable to update the program or print to the shell. So far, no problems. The 1N5817 diode was not chosen at random. Compared to regular diodes, Schottky diodes feature a lower forward voltage drop, approximately 0.4 volts for the 1N5817. This maximizes the transfer of 5 volts DC from the power rail to the Pico W. Also, the 1N5817 has a maximum peak reverse voltage of 20 volts and an average forward current of 1 amp. This should be more than sufficient in a 5-volt Pico W project. What could possibly go wrong? According to Google, over 90% of all semiconductor diodes that fail from electrical or thermal stress fail specifically as short circuits. If either D1 or D2 becomes a short circuit, we could have a serious problem when the USB cable is plugged in and the breadvolt is on. What are the chances of that? Google also says the anticipated failure rate of a standard 1N5817 diode is typically 0.1% to 1% per 1,000 hours of operation. So to sum up, if D1 or D2 fails, it will likely become a short circuit. The chance of failure is low, but it's not zero. The cost of a shorted diode could be high. Using a 1N5817 diode might save you if you forget to turn off the breadvolt when plugging in the USB cable, but it might not. The choice is yours. I'm not recommending you do this. Let's hook up the breadvolt, review the code, and take this gear on the road. As soon as I took the GPS tracker outside for its first road trip, I realized that it was not feasible to photograph the OLED in the bright sunlight. Instead of photographing the display, I repurposed the red push button to be a record button. Whenever I press the red push button, the Pico will append the variables shown here to a Pico W file named lesson12.csv. Aside from the record function, the code for this assignment is the same as the code for lessons 9 and 10. I'll explain the new code and skim over the rest. If you need a more thorough explanation of the original code, there's a link to the lesson 9-10 assignment in the description below this video. The majority of this program is the same as lesson 9-10. File mode is a new variable in lesson 12. Initially set to nothing, the red push button will set it to S. Here we see how red button ISR has been repurposed to set file mode to S. OLED page 3 has been modified to show a prompt for the red push button. When file mode is S and the date and time variables contain real data, we append the current date and time, lat lon, true and magnetic headings, and speed variables to the lesson 12 CSV file. The \n character ensures that each line of data will appear on a new line. Once the data is written to the file mode is reset to null. Let's examine the data file. Here we see the lesson 12 CSV file that was recorded on the Pico W during our brief road trip. The first point was recorded at rest at the end of my driveway. Google Earth says that first point should be the latitude and longitude shown here. That's a relatively small error. The second point was taken without stopping to see if we'd get a speed reading. Google Earth says that second point has the lat and long shown here, also a relatively small error. The third point was recorded at rest in front of the local historic church. Google Earth says the third point should have the lat and long shown here, and again, it's a relatively small error. It seems that the GPS lat and long parameters are fairly accurate. Let's evaluate the GPS speed parameter. This data was recorded while riding in a car being driven for a few minutes at an approximate speed of 40 kilometers an hour, then for another few minutes at 30 kilometers an hour. The data from the lesson 12 CSV file was loaded into Excel for study. The speed parameter seems to be within plus or minus 6% of the nominal speed. So the GPS tracker lat, lon, and speed parameters seem to be fairly accurate. Looks like mission accomplished. Well, that's it for this assignment. Any and all comments are welcome. Don't forget to like or dislike the video before you go. And feel free to subscribe. Don't forget the notification bell. We'll talk to you next time.